Welcome to Stereo 3D Productions, the channel that deeply advocates against cruelty towards demons and satanically motivated creatures. I want to assure you all that absolutely not a single demon, possessed rabbit, or other animal in service of the Dark Lord were harmed in the making of this video. Okay, maybe a few. A couple of dozens, actually. We may have gotten a species or two extinct, actually. Sorry. You're watching a VorpX tutorial series that is founded on the VorpX Universal Guide video. If you haven't watched that yet, there will be a link to the Universal Guide at the top of the description of this video. I suggest you watch that first before any game-specific tutorial, as it covers all the basic elements VorpX offers. Second, if you see the tag outdated in the title of this video, it means this tutorial has been completely redone into a newer version. If you see the tag updated, it means we've got additional information in a new video regarding this game. If you see either tag, just look for a link to the update video or the replacement tutorial at the top of the description. The videos in this series all contain a table of contents in the description with time codes. Feel free to use those to skip to any section in the video. If you know this channel, you're probably aware that my favorite VR game of all time is in fact Shadow Warrior, the 2013 remake. Yes, my favorite VR game is a game that doesn't even support virtual reality out of the box. It's a VorpX-powered setup. For those of you who followed the Let's Play series, I'll link it in the description. I played Shadow Warrior 2013 with 3 different headsets over the span of 2 years. It took me for thrill rides, took me on sightseeing journeys. I took my time with the game. I didn't even want to finish it. If you listen to my voice at the end of the final part, you'll see what I mean. I saw the sequel released last year, and the moment I could, I tried running it with VorpX, and it was a complete letdown. The 3D wasn't working, the game was running like butt cheese, and the head tracking was beyond busted. It was bad enough that I even had the game refunded. Fast forward to early 2018 when VorpX dropped version 18 of their software. On the list of newly supported games with proper stereoscopic 3D, Shadow Warrior 2. I immediately repurchased the game and, in excitement, started it with VorpX. The time had come to re-enter this insane game world by venturing into the sequel. At first it was a very tricky endeavor. Sure, the game worked right out of the box, just like any manual VR experience would, but it wasn't short of problems, many problems. The image was too blurry, there was no decent anti-aliasing technique, the performance was abysmal, and some things just plain didn't work right. However, with now 14 hours of gameplay and counting under my belt, I can safely say everything about my setup has been improved to the point where it can finally rival its original, and it's something you've absolutely got to play, provided you've got the VR legs for it, and have tried your share of extreme experiences in games already. In my first few hours of gameplay, I recognized the amazing feel of the first game, except this sequel sent extra voltage through my veins, really showing itself as a worthy successor to a game I had loved so much. Be warned, this game is for adrenaline junkies and those who like blistering fast motion. It's most definitely not for the faint of heart or those who haven't gotten solid VR legs yet. It's probably 2 or 3 times more intense than its predecessor, and if you can take it, if the notion of feeling like an aerobatic aircraft performing a free-fall hangover maneuver for 3 hours straight sounds like your jazz, by all means, keep on watching. As usual with all our VorpX-powered games, first things first, we're going to start the game on the desktop in 2D without VorpX running and with our VR runtimes disabled. Now this is going to seem odd, it's a break from tradition, but you're not going into any settings menu right away. Just go ahead and close the game. Don't even need to play it, just close the thing. Now, start VorpX, fire up your VR runtimes, either Oculus Home or SteamVR, and finally launch Shadow Warrior 2 again. It's going to start up in VR this time. See, we have 2 things to do here. First off, VorpX will change some internal game settings that might not be available from the menu, so we'll have it take care of that now. First, enable edge peak so you can use the game's menus. click your middle mouse button to toggle it. Without this, you will not be able to click the exit game option when we're done. VorpX may tell you a game restart is required at this point, but we won't restart it just now. We have one more thing to do. Before restarting, we'll make sure VorpX never changes a setting for this game ever again. That's right, the stock configuration VorpX sets up for this game is absolutely awful, and will want to override a lot of what it's done. Open the VorpX in-game menu by pressing the delete key, go to the Direct VR category, and set Change Game Settings to Off. Remember to hit OK and save so that option sticks. At this point, you can go ahead and close VorpX, disable your VR runtimes, and finally restart the game on your desktop in 2D. I'll be recording this section with the game running at 1920 by 1080 for image clarity, but VorpX should have already set your resolution to 1400 by 1050, and the game will probably be full screen. We're going to fix that, and we'll set our graphics details options along the way. Let's break open those graphics options. We've got a few things to look at, because the first issue we have to tackle is the fact that this game is seriously demanding. Out of all the titles I've covered in this series, this one takes the cake in terms of slaying your CPU, your GPU, and flooding every single pipeline in between. Shadow Warrior 2 is a performance hog, and we have to make a good deal of compromise on almost every setting. Fortunately, the changes we'll make won't damage the visuals that badly. Even though we're toning down a lot of settings, the result is still very impressive, still more visually stunning than most first-party VR games I've played to date. First, set the field of view to 90 degrees. VorpX should have already set this to 96, but we'll be using different scaling values to improve the image sharpness in-game, along with a little bit of a performance boost. Set gamma to 1.3, it's worked out great for me with SteamVR. You can lower it a bit if you find the setting too bright. Now, scroll past the resolution options, we'll take care of that last. For now, follow my lead on the screen, and I'll highlight the important changes I'm making. First, make sure that triple buffering is unchecked and that VSync is off. This is extremely important. Set multi-res shading to 100%, which effectively disables it. We won't need that. Your overall graphics quality should be set to custom. Change it if it's not already. We'll be offering only 2 resolutions in this setup. One for the low and mid-end systems, and another for the high-end. If you plan on using the low-end resolutions for, say, a GTX 1060 or equivalent, make sure you set resolution scale to 110. If you plan on using the low-end resolution but have a mid-end system using a GTX 1070 or equivalent, set this to 120. If you plan on using the higher-end resolutions for systems with a GTX 1080 equivalent or above, set resolution scale to 110. Keep in mind for later that if you're having performance issues once you get to playing the game, lowering this setting will in fact make a difference. I'm giving you the starting points for what will look best, but you can by all means lower this later by 5 or 10 points if you want a little boost in frame rate. For the following options, we're going to either lower or disable almost everything. Now, textures can stay on ultra. Even the low-end GPUs have enough memory nowadays. Same for anisotropic filtering, but for the shadows and the volumetric fog, go on low. Those are hogs. Uncheck temporal anti-aliasing, possibly the single worst artificial AA method known to man. TAA looks like garbage. I'll skip over lens flares for now. Let's make absolutely sure to uncheck motion blur unless we want to almost instantly vomit the second we get in game. Motion blur is VR's #1 enemy. Leave depth of field checked on. And yes, I'm absolutely fine, I mean that. I'll explain why after. Uncheck chromatic aberration, it's an effect that will make you sick in VR. Uncheck film grain, an effect that simulates eye disease in VR. And leave bloom checked. Now go uncheck lens flare. See, the bloom alone is a pretty cool effect that compensates for the lack of lens flares, and the flares themselves won't render correctly when this game runs in VR anyways. Unchecked subsurface scattering. Yes, that one hurts to disable, but it's way too costly for your GPU. Uncheck SSAO, it's an effect that's fairly unnoticeable in VR and will just slow down your GPU. Uncheck screen space reflections, that effect won't really matter for your VR experience. And now we get to the last 4 options. I'll make it simple for you, put everything on low. No matter what kind of system you're running, I don't care, put everything on low. The only setting you can increase if you want is level of detail, which can go up to medium, but this will cost you on your frame rate, and while it looks a tad better, I myself run this on low even though I have a system that can handle it on medium. I'd just rather have a bit more frame rate. Last note, why did I leave depth of field checked? Because the effect isn't so strong as to blur your view, but in addition to this, with low to medium level of detail, distant trees in the game will look like cardboard cutout panels that move and pivot every single time your head moves. Depth of field will hide this problem, thus making the background objects pivoting a lot less distracting to the point where you won't notice them. Now that we've done the graphics quality settings, scroll back up to the top and set the game to windowed mode. This game won't work correctly in full screen. For the resolution, there is an issue with this game where it'll grow a brain and try to fill your desktop when you set it to windowed mode rather than just let you pick a resolution. You'll notice when it's set to windowed, all the resolution controls are disabled. I'll be showing you an extra step to take using a program called Sizer so we can force the windowed game to work at the resolution we need. Go ahead and apply your changes, then close the game. Now it's time to get the app called Sizer. I'll link you in the description. The software is entirely free. Once it's installed, open its settings from the taskbar and delete all the default sizes. Then click the Add button. Rename the new entry to 1400 by 1050, and for the size values, enter 1402 for width and 1072 for height. This is the low and mid-end resolution. Repeat this for 1600 by 1200, entering 1602 for width and 1222 for height. This is the high-end resolution. Notice I'm adding 2 pixels on the width and 22 on the height. This is to provide a margin for the height of the Windows title bar and the width of the Windows frame. You can use this trick to run the game at any resolution you want actually, adding in a margin for the Windows border edges and the title bar. I do not recommend going any higher than 1600 by 1200 because the game will start experiencing terrible performance if you surpass this mark. The next time you launch Shadow Warrior 2, make sure Sizer is up and running, then right-click the Minimize Maximize icon of the game's window and select the resolution you'll be using from there. Now finally, it's time to launch VorpX and your VR runtimes for good, then fire up Shadow Warrior 2 one more time. I must mention that often when you open the VorpX in-game menu with this title, the arrow keys can get stuck and start repeat pressing themselves. It's a terrible VorpX bug that has yet to be fixed. If this happens to you, you'll either see the menu you're in freaking out, or you'll see your rotation going completely wild. To stop this issue, leave the VorpX in-game menu by pressing the delete key, fiddle with your arrow keys a bit until the rotation or the menu freakout stops, then reopen the VorpX in-game menu, as this should not happen again within this session. Start a new game, and once you're given full controls, go ahead and open the VorpX in-game menu by pressing the delete key. Under Main Settings, make sure 3D Reconstruction is set to Geometry and set Separation Strength to 0.75 for a realistic impression of world scale. Keep in mind that both Z-Normal and Z-Adaptive may be available in the game, but both do not function correctly at all, won't produce any depth perception, and may even lead to sim sickness after a short while playing. Geometry is the only functional option here. Next, under Image Settings, set Image Zoom to 0.85. This will give you a slight visible edge on the upper and lower ends of your field of view, but it'll also compensate for this game's lack in pixel density, giving a sharper output. 0.85 is the value that works well with a field of view set at 90 degrees. Once you've got your image zoom set, go back up to Crystal Image and toggle it between off and normal. This is really up to you to decide on which looks better, but in my case, having played with both options, I do find that off is a slight advantage because it frees up a bit of performance budget and it really doesn't look bad at all. Normal will look a bit sharper, but may come with a tad more aliasing as well. There's also the HUD scale value, which by default you'll find at 0.5. Set it to that if it's not. Now, you may want to lower this value a little more, say as low as 0.44, but be warned that the text will become absolutely unreadable. It's already very tight as it is with 0.5. I've simply left mine to that, and I just move my eyes within the headset to see the information on my display. It's not optimal, but it works out well enough. Last, for image settings, set background to ambiance. This is going to compensate a little bit for the visible edges at the top and bottom of our view, making them a lot less noticeable. Next, go to display settings and make sure that direct mode fluid sync is set to off. That option is going to cap your frame rate, and really, this is not something Shadow Warrior 2 needs. Finally, pass by the head tracking settings category, and if you haven't changed the mouse sensitivity setting in the game, your head tracking sensitivity should be at 0.63, which is the default for this game's profile. If you've altered your mouse sensitivity with the game in any way, you're going to need to refer to the manual VR section of the VorpX Universal Guide in order to learn how to adjust head tracking using the shoulder-to-shoulder method. An important note before you get on your way, remember that whenever you open menus in this game, you will have to use Edge Peek, which is a VorpX feature you can enable by clicking your middle mouse button at any point. If you don't do this, first the menus will be downright broken, and also it'll be very hard to see what you're doing. Not to mention you'll need to open these menus often to upgrade your weapons, accept missions, apply skills, and more. Enable Edge Peek when opening a menu, then disable it by clicking your middle mouse button again when returning to gameplay. That's about it. You're ready to play the game at this point. Remember that being a manual VR setup, your in-game vertical orientation will often differ from your head's vertical orientation, meaning that you may find yourself looking up in real life while your character is looking straight ahead in the game. To fight this issue, I personally use a mechanical ball mouse that's been modified not to respond on the vertical pitch axis, which I've dubbed a pitch-locked mouse. This makes sure that the only thing sending vertical axis information to my game is VorpX and VorpX alone. Of course, this doesn't mean there won't be any drift at all, even with the solution, but when there is a drift, the game makes it very easy to correct. By default, the up and down arrow keys adjust the vertical axis. So with a flick of the hand, I can quickly readjust any offset that forms and get back to my pitch-locked mouse to continue gameplay. The arrow keys are so convenient to use, I've been able to perform my corrections mid-combat, even in the middle of dashing and attacking. I cannot repeat it enough. This game provides intense motion, the kind that will make an extreme VR junkie like me jubilate with excitement, but also something that will make a VR newbie or someone with weak VR legs reach for the 4-gallon bucket. I'm trying to make this as clear as I can. This game is most definitely not for the faint of heart. However, if you're looking at the gameplay here and think, I want me some of that, then by all means join in. This has to be the most incredible movement I've ever felt in VR, and I don't think real life will ever come close. This coming from a guy who's done flight school, scuba diving, and been in go-karts that exceed 80 miles an hour and pull 0 to 60 in under 3 seconds, nothing can reproduce the feeling of power Shadow Warrior 2 will give you. That's right, not even its predecessor. I've always been weary with sequels, bothered by having to wonder if it's even going to come close to its original. Well, in this case, that bother went away quickly because it literally feels like I left at the end of Shadow Warrior 2013 and just picked up where the game, the story, and its mechanics left off. Flying Wild Hog did an amazing job at building on the cool stuff they had going for them in the first game's mechanics and added what I think is a perfect balance of new elements to make the play even more enjoyable. The weapon variety is exemplary, the added moves like double jump and ledge grabbing are largely welcome, and while I'm not crazy about the elemental stuff requiring extensive time spent in the menus upgrading your weapons and doing tedious management, it's by no means stopped me from enjoying this game at its fullest. It's very possible that once I get through this, Shadow Warrior 2 will be sharing a spot with its predecessor as my favorite games of all time. In fact, I might even observe the pair as one entity down the line because they've connected so well and translate to virtual reality so perfectly, one feels like a direct extension of the other. I'm going to be playing much more of Shadow Warrior 2 as time goes. It's got a long campaign, a co-op mode that I've played with Eincro from Eincro Productions Co., and it's even got some DLC that I have yet to check out, so I'm almost sure to outclock my playtime on the first installment of the franchise. Let's give Shadow Warrior 2 a V-score. The V-score is a rating created to evaluate how well a game runs in virtual reality using VorpX. The rating is on a scale of 100 and is based on 8 criteria, along with a penalty value if necessary. The first category of 4 criteria are the requirements. These are the high-value elements required to provide an authentic VR experience. Having an acceptable 3D reconstruction method is worth 30 points because no 3D means no depth perception and means no VR. Next, proper geometry 3D brings a game to life by providing the only authentic stereoscopic 3D method, so 10 points for that. Shadow Warrior 2 works in beautiful, realistic geometry 3D, so full score for this criteria. Next, proper head tracking, which is important, unreliable tracking can destroy a VR experience, is worth 15 points in total. No issues with Shadow Warrior 2 and head tracking, full score 15 points. VR requires games running with sufficient field of view, and because of the various ways we can achieve this, some more effective and some less, this is worth up to 15 points. With our custom setup, we've got a pretty good field of view in this game and haven't hit any impossible limits, full score for field of view. The second category of 4 criteria are the features. This covers desirable features with games running on VorpX regarding graphics and rendering. With third-party VR, it's hard to come by proper shadows and graphics effects across the board. Dynamic shadows often cause issues, and some effects might render incorrectly. A game can gain up to 10 points based on this aspect. It's not perfect, but Shadow Warrior 2 is almost there. I'm taking off 1 point for the aliasing in this game, which is real and needs a few extra steps to improve, and another point is being removed for how the weather effects are out to lunch as far as stereoscopic 3D goes. That's right, they're not real particles, they're lazy 2D overlays. 8 points in total for shadows and graphics. Proper 3D hands and weapon models are very hard to find in third-party VR. It's quite rare, but it will get a game up to 5 points for getting it right. Wow, I think it's the first time that twice in a row I give the game I'm covering a full score on this criteria. That's right, Shadow Warrior 2's hand models are seriously perfect. Even the first game didn't have this going for it, so I'm really impressed. A proper user interface and heads-up display means being able to see your health, ammo count, and such. It also means being able to navigate menus. Up to 5 points for how a game handles a heads-up display. Okay, so this is a tough one, and I'm giving the game a 3 here, because for the most part, it's very hard to read the heads-up display during gameplay. Sure, the menus themselves can be navigated with edge peek, and mostly everything is perfectly easy to read, but that in-game overlay is tight, something fierce, and most of the numbers won't be readable, not to mention it'll be hard to keep everything within your view without shrinking the HUD too much. DirectVR makes the process of setting up a game much easier, and often delivers perfect head tracking. Based on how a game supports it, it can get up to 10 points in bonus. While DirectVR wanted to help us here, the built-in VorpX setup is nothing short of a disaster, giving incorrect settings like being on full screen, stretching the image way too much, and creating a barely playable blurry mess that immediately needs fixing. 0 for this category. Sorry DirectVR, better luck next time. Finally, outside of our two scoring categories, we have the good old penalty criteria. The penalty criteria is here to offset a game's score due to glitches or major issues. Up to 10 points can be withdrawn. I could slam this game for the intense motion or its nasty aliasing, but no, I'm taking off 2 points because it's simply a performance hog. You'll be running this on high-end hardware and you'll still find yourself struggling to get past 45 frames per second. This by no means hinders the gameplay. A synchronous time warp goes a long way into saving the day, but obviously it's always preferable to have a real frame rate above 60 frames per second, and it's barely ever happening in Shadow Warrior 2. Shadow Warrior 2 lands a very nice V-score of 84. Again, another very respectable score for a manual VR setup, one that very well represents how good this game runs with VorpX. Sure, it's 3 points behind its predecessor, but that's mostly due to a much trickier user interface and a far higher demand on performance. The bottom line is I highly recommend playing both games with VorpX, preferably in the order they've been released. We're done for this VorpX guide. Expect to see more in the near future. I've now gotten 2 requests for Outlast 2, so I may very well get to that game as early as I can. I also wanted to go over Hard Reset, which is a game that I played to record footage for the revised Universal Guide, and frankly, I had a really good time playing it. It's worth a look. Until next time, thanks for watching. I will see you soon.